WKFM first, 93.7 The Ticket. Live from the 93.7 The Ticket studios in the heart of Lincoln, America, this is Inside the Huddle with Nebraska Football Hall of Famer Jay Foreman.
Fires a pass, and it's intercepted by the Huskers at the 25, Jay Foreman. And Foreman takes it down to the 19-yard line of Oklahoma. Another big play by the Blackshirts.
On 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com. Sponsored by Advanced Medical Imaging.
Good morning again on a Sunday. This is Inside the Huddle. Jay Foreman, brought to you by Advanced Medical Imaging, 7601 Pioneers Boulevard. Great place to start and end for all your pain needs and to get a good game plan for your future dealings with anything you have to do with your body. Plus, they do some pretty cool stuff with helping with concussions and migraines, and also plantar fasciitis is huge, Harrison, in everybody. It's not just it's a let's say it was a for us or for me when I played, it was a injury that was, I think, new on the scene and maybe not diagnosed as much, but so guys had to play through it. You know, the good old back in the day they said we didn't get water, we just got this, couple ice cubes and we were tougher. They do some really innovative things to relieve pain and plantar fasciitis, which I have myself as well. But obviously, Harrison, the thing is, when we first started, we kind of had to really search and have stuff going on. I got like the notes on your phone.
Yeah.
I got like 20 things and we don't have enough time.
Yeah, I was curious where you want to start.
First of all, we're going to jump right into this and not get it over with, but obviously we got a lot of things to cover. Big Ten, obviously numerous Husker news. Today is Fan Day, so it is the official. These guys are, the fans should be. It's kind of like for Fan Day, Harrison is like, I don't know if you ever watched like Gladiator or any of those type of, or like like the Romans when they would go off to like war or whatever, and like the whole like town or castle or village would be clapping for them, sending them off. That's what Fan Day is. It literally is.
It does feel like
is.
that.
It is not that like real war is real war, but I'm talking about the analogy. That's literally what it is.
Yeah, you see Lincoln lining up on the roads. It's
it's Lincoln lining up. They're gonna come see. You're gonna get the all warm and fuzzy, and then once it's over and you're walking, the switch has to turn to, we are trying to develop some sort of team warlike mentality because it started to be with the practice tomorrow. But we're going to jump right into it. First and foremost, big congratulations, big ups to Terrence Bud Crawford. You do have respect on your name for the dominating performance last night against Earl Spence. I will tell you this, it was disappointing in the sense of, I tweeted out Earl Spence should be embarrassed. Number one, because and the thing is, well, here's what people don't understand is, like, when you say this has nothing to do with Bud. The way Bud fights and the way he was prepared, I always talk about the look of the eye of the tiger. He had it. Now Earl Spence is always, for all you people out there, he's from Texas. He's a slow talker. I call it a slow tongue. That's just the way he is. But he should be embarrassed in the sense of, you showed up unprepared and you fought like that, right?
Yeah, it wasn't if for all those who got to watch it, it wasn't very close. It was pretty. I don't think anyone saw that coming. I some people, even if you favored Crawford, I don't think you saw him dominating that like that.
Yeah, Bud was like, the thing that Spence was talking about, people were like he was bigger than, but now walking around he is. Now I will say he had to cut some weight, a lot of weight. So it's a more taxing. It'd be like me and you, right? And we get it at a catch weight. I'm 250, and if you got to get up to, I don't know how much you weigh, you only got to gain 10 pounds, and I got to drop 30. It is different.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to have a really good trainer and a nutritionist in order to do so. And also for Spence, if he's naturally walking around at a heavier weight, he has to prepare for this fight, just say 2 months before Bud. You get what I'm saying? Because it's not just like, okay, let's just go to camp and then we just shed it over 6 weeks. This is a 15-week periodic leading up to it. But anyways, as far as the boxing goes, it was I mean, it was disappointing for the way that Spence performed. And then it was extremely exciting and, like, again, put Nebraska on the map and more importantly, put Bud into the history books. And I'll say this as far as two things with that, and then we'll also move into a lot of things, and we'll kind of go what we're going to go over is the reason why it was disappointing because of Earl Spence's lack of fundamentals. You know, I grew up watching boxing and did little Golden Gloves, but his lack of fundamental. I mean, Earl Spence is a guy that's kind of been a golden boy and been very, through his career.
Yeah, he's been undefeated.
And even in the amateur ranks just coming up. Dude, you look like he would have been better off having one of us in there. Now, again, but then when you look at Bud, this is where it puts Bud. And I don't tweet out of like emotion or like, okay, this is it. This is where, this is the analogy that I like to try to bring it back to football. 1995, right? Nebraska was thought, okay, we got a given national championship after, we beat Miami, but it was ugly, right? And people kind of been always doubting Nebraska and beating them down. Nebraska's been underwhelming at times in big games. Now, Bud hadn't been like that, but it was 95, first time 1 against 1, the first time in a long time or maybe ever, right? You had Nebraska 95 against Florida. Right, Florida was if you go back and listen, Florida was the favorite. How could Nebraska handle Florida? Florida is this, Florida is that, and then you get out there, and Nebraska is the greatest of all time against Florida, who's the paper champ, and that's what it looked like last night, and that's the difference. Where Bud's going right now, and the reason why I say, when you think about Floyd Mayweather and that, and see, and this is where boxing has gone. The one thing Floyd Mayweather has kind of taught these boxers is how to make the most money and be strategic about it, right? Obviously, Earl Spence Jr., his strategy was very wrong. You need to fight Bud when he's 40 something, not that, right? And whereas Bud loves to fight, and he wants to fight the best. I think Bud would be, now I wouldn't say it'd be okay, but if he went in there and say he fought Davis or somebody and say he lost, he wants to fight him again because he'll want to go back and do it. So now where Bud's at, when you compare it to the greats of all time, is that Bud hasn't ducked anybody. See, that's the difference to me, right? He fought Spence at his prime, and then if he fights Davis and beats Davis's prime, you're talking about the greatest, at least definitely in his weight class. And then overall, I don't think you have to be undefeated to be the greatest of all time. He's getting into that conversation, in the conversation constantly. And so I think that's great. And obviously last night was a cherry on top, and they had a big UFC fight. Did you see that knockout with that kick to the head?
I saw the clip in there, but I didn't actually watch the whole pay-per-view.
Boy, he mollywhopped and knocked him out. And then so that was the revenge fight for Gaeth, and it was the second. And then I don't know if they're going to fight again because they're talking about that guy. He's going to fight either Conor McGregor or somebody else.
Well, did you see that Errol Spence? He's already claiming his rematch clause, so there'll be a second.
Well, first of all, money wise, you should. And if you really didn't fight good and that does happen. You just kind of just dookie down your leg, right?
Yeah.
It does happen. It happens all the time.
Oh yeah, you see it all the time in the UFC. That first minute, someone gets knocked out that you're not expecting.
Right, you just don't perform well. You've seen golfers doing it. You've seen Nebraska do it.
Which is fair. We didn't see the best of Errol Spence.
Take the look. At the end of the day, Bud would tell you that's not the best. That's not Errol Spence that he expected to fight. Errol Spence would tell you that he didn't fight his best fight, and the rematch clause is in there. And why wouldn't you exercise it if? For nothing else, that you believe that you could put on a better performance, number one. And number two, that's the biggest fight that you're going to get right now for the situation, make a lot of money.
Well, and if he wins that one,
then there's a third.
Yeah, which would be,
and then
that'd be a super fight.
Super fight. That would be, in this day and time, the best fight of all time, because they're still in their prime and they still want to fight each other. But moving on, Harrison, we're going to try to get all this done. As camp starts, we're going to talk a little bit about fan days. We're going to talk about rules. Are they tough or just the new standard? Right? There's an article about that. We're going to talk about moving into the dorms and what does it mean and what's the purpose behind it. And then obviously we're going to address the Bob Wager situation. How does it affect the team? Both in not just the players, but the coaching staff. I would say within the next recruiting cycles, the next two, I think it could have some effect. I think they're insulated in the sense of that they have enough around them that'd be good. And then I think in the last segment we're going to talk about we'll talk about the running back news and talk about Jonathan Taylor and Irsay and what it really means. And that'd be right before we sign off, because I think it's interesting what Irsay said, what he said, and what he really means. And that's just from experience and stuff. But I think I went to Big Ten Media Days. It was a lot of work, man. It was, you're up early and bed late, and you're up early, bed late. And it was interesting because of the Northwestern situation.
Well, Minnesota situation too.
And Michigan situation came out like the week of or a week before, or a couple of days before. And then the Minnesota situation literally.
Was that first day?
First day, we were talking to Daryl Thompson, who's a former. I've been knowing Daryl since I've been in middle school.
Yeah, former Gopher, right?
Former Gopher. He does their radio and play-by-play, and then Barry Alvarez was there. So I don't know if they knew it or whatever, or anything like that. It didn't really. When I was trying to get some more inside intel off air from Daryl the next day, but it literally broke as we were talking, because I started getting texts as we went, when we were on a break. So that was very interesting. And obviously everybody wanted to see how Northwestern was going to handle it. They originally were going to have 3 players come. They decided just to send their interim coach. I will say this. I felt like for the situation, he handled it the best that he could. He was up there. Look, he just got there in February, so he has no experience with this stuff. So and it's a good opportunity for him to be a head coach, He gave an opening statement. He didn't dance around the situation. He highlighted the players that were going to come. He highlighted what the players, in general, what he felt about the team. And he set a standard of, while he was coach, what was going to happen, and just talked about the excitement that he has, going into the season. That's all he could do. He did a couple little interviews and he was out of there. I think the flight from Chicago to Indianapolis probably was, 28 minutes flight time. Yeah. I think he spent more time driving from the airport to Lucas Oil back to the airport than he was there, but it was needed. So I want to give respect to him to handling that. And then as far as the Minnesota thing goes, which is interesting because it's like the third or fourth time this professor has kind of floated this idea out there, and he's kind of maybe added a little something every year because he's just waiting for guys. What I think this professor is doing, he has a deep-rooted personal issue with the athletic program, or what I mean, in general, and particularly the football team. And every guy that's went in the transfer portal is definitely, contacted by him, and he kind of releases stuff every year to various media outlets, and it's going to get traction. It's going to get a ton of traction based on the Northwestern situation. I guarantee you there'll be some more here in some form or fashion within the next football season cycle as well, just based on the Northwestern situation. But PJ Fleck, I will tell you this, he was there early. Well, first of all, I saw him the night before at Elmo's. Got to talk to him a little bit. Now, I will say this. I talked to him last year in Big Ten Media Days. Met with him a couple times in the offseason about something. Saw him again at Elmo's. he was a little bit, I guess, uptight, which he should be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look, who won? I mean, you're there to highlight the players that you brought with you, and here you go, and he really feels that this situation is unmerited and stuff. So that was a little different. But I would tell you what, the next day, he was there bright and early, because I was sat there and got to watch him. Right. Nothing changed. He sought out Adam Rittenberg, which obviously broke the Northwestern, sat down and gave him one-on-one, did all his stuff, local stuff in Media Row. Didn't do ours because he was definitely the one-on-ones that he had probably more obligation to. Minnesota State were extremely long. You know what I mean? He went on Big Ten. He went a series. I mean, he probably had some stuff he had to take care of. And then went up on stage and addressed it all. And I think for him versus the Northwestern situation, which is totally two different situations, the athletic director set the tone. He came out and gave 100% a vote of confidence for PJ Fleck and said this stuff is unmerited. So then it gave PJ Fleck more power and the confidence to go out and address it. But he felt like they're doing the right things anyways. And the one thing I liked about what he said, and this is the thing that Matt Rule will say, I'm sure you'll hear some things about Matt Rule at some point in his coaching tenure will have to say the same thing. PJ Fleck is at Minnesota, in the way that he does things, or way that the standard that they have is not for everybody, right? I'm sure Matt Rule will say his standard and holding guys accountable and whatever it is, this isn't going to be for everybody, right? Maybe the way that maybe the way they practice isn't the way for everybody. And PJ Fleck is not for everybody. Not everybody's going to have a good experience. I won 3 national championships, was here during the highlight of Nebraska's football history, and there's guys that didn't have it wasn't for everybody. There's some great players that wasn't for everybody that came here on recruiting trips, and we had to tell them what the things that we were doing. Georgia's not for everybody. Alabama's not for everybody. That's the way it is. We had a couple guys that come up here from Alabama. It wasn't for them. That's the way it is. And so and that doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing anything wrong or it's a cult or anything like that. But I think it's one of those things that people are trying a little bit too hard to draw like a baseline hazing cult.
The cult thing is what threw me off, because that word was getting thrown around a lot.
That was from the professor, and I will say this: PJ Fleck, the way he does things is a little different, right?
But I like nothing like that's
nothing
like
it. Yeah,
to call it cult.
Cult. Yeah, like the whole and he tried to say, okay, well, when he walks in, you do the clap thing. Well, I've been places where you clap to start the meeting, kind of get your attention, and then you clap when at especially like 2 times when it's done. It's just kind of like a team thing, and that's the way it was. I think actually, to be honest with you, I think there's like video of it where PJ Fleck does it and stuff like that, and maybe it's just part of his deal.
Get their attention, like, are you guys focused?
Right.
Yeah, I'm about to talk. Are you guys locked in on me?
Yeah, locked in.
That's kind of how I read it. I'm like, that's nothing weird there.
Right. And it's the way it is. And, college football, big personalities sometimes set you up for big, judgments. And that's the way it is. And then, the other situation with Michigan, with Jim Harbaugh, I thought was really unique because in comparison to Tennessee, what they did or what happened in Michigan versus Tennessee is probably, was it 1 level 1 violation and they moved it down to a 2.
Yeah.
Tennessee, I think, had like in the teens or maybe even 20 level 1s and obviously 200 other, 180 other violations. They got an $8 million fine and maybe lost some scholarships. Whereas now Michigan's head coach is going to be suspended for 4 games. And the suspension is stupid. You can coach all week. You can address the team on Saturday or on Friday. You just can't go to the games. That's the dumbest thing ever. So you're just like, okay, well, you can't go to the games, like, and you're playing against a bunch of scrubs. You're not doing anything. It's not like you're suspended without pay.
Yeah,
because you're working. Supposedly it's 4 games. They're still kind of quote unquote working on it. They'll release it probably by Friday this week. Kind of bury it in the news cycle. But it was different. It was interesting how Jim Harbaugh addressed it versus PJ Fleck. Now it's 2 different things. Harbaugh erred on the thing is like, I can't speak about it right now. He wouldn't have, but probably the most interesting thing that came out of it was when you talk to the players about it. Blake Corum, Chris Jenkins, that came over and talked to us. They're motivated by it. They really believe in Harbaugh. They really love Jim Harbaugh. It almost is they're going to be hyper focused. Essentially, that sometimes when you beat Ohio State twice, double down on what people perceived as being luck, and then beat them down, like they did last year, you could lose your edge. Like, we've arrived, right? We've been to college football playoffs. You could lie to yourself and say the TCU loss was luck. 9 times out of 10, Michigan probably will win that game. We'll just kind of we just got to show up and we'll get back there again, right? We can beat Ohio State. We just got to be physical and lose your edge, that little edge or that big edge or inspiration you need to get to the mountaintop or over the hump. This could be it right here. This could be what they're trying to do, to be their rallying cry, for it to lead them to another Big Ten championship and to the college football playoffs. And, they're thinking national championship now. They're thinking, not less, people are like, oh, can you win one game in the, the Final Four college football playoffs? They're thinking we got to win 2. That's what those players are talking about. That's what they're training for. It's almost like they are not moving past Ohio State, because every day I think that until they beat Ohio State, they were saying they trained for to be better than Ohio State, because that's the standard, right? I got the sense that they've moved on past that.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, why wouldn't you trust the process?
Right.
You're getting closer and closer.
Right.
And then you just lost to a TCU team, which that one, I mean, I'd imagine that puts a chip on your shoulder too, just kind of how that played out. I mean, that was a disaster.
Yeah.
And you guys beat Ohio State, and Ohio State actually pushed Georgia.
Right. Well, Ohio State had Georgia beat until I feel that there was a cheap shot on Marvin Harrison Jr. In the end zone. And the kicker missed the field goal, and it was bad clock management by Ryan Day.
What happened?
Georgia didn't beat Ohio State. Ohio State beat themselves. It was bad clock management, missed the easy field goal that he's made. He's a great kicker all year, and a cheap shot that didn't get called for targeting in the end zone, which would have changed the whole landscape of it. That safety's gone, and if you didn't do it anyways, Marvin Harrison is still in the game, and they were flat out unstoppable. It was very interesting to see how they walked around. I know we're up against the clock, but I'm gonna tell you what, coming out of the break, reluctantly, I'm gonna tell you about 2 teams that were actually impressive. And I hate to say it, but they were.
Yeah, no one's Iowa.
Yeah, extremely impressive. I just can't believe that I'm gonna have to say these 2 teams were very impressive, both in how they arrived, but how they carried themselves, and also how talking to the coach or coaches off air where they are. And then I'll say where Nebraska ranks. Does it change? I'm going to ask you, Harris, I want you to think about this in the break. After Big Ten Media Days, I know it's just Big Ten Media and just getting there and hyping up your program. Does it change your record or what you think they're going to end up as? Might have changed mine, but we'll see. We're going to go to break. This is Jay Foreman Inside the Huddle, brought to you by Advanced Medical Imaging. After a quick break, we'll be right back. This is former Husker and NFL linebacker Jay Foreman. For years, I've suffered from degenerative problems in both of my ankles, but thanks to a thorough and thought-out plan provided by Advanced Medical Imaging, I was able to get my life back with the least amount of pain as possible. While working through multiple options, the team of physicians at Advanced Medical Imaging were there to answer any questions I had. If you're experiencing any pain at all and want to get your life back, go to amimaging.com or give them a call at 402-484-6677. Advanced Medical Imaging, located at 7601 Pioneers Boulevard.
As an 18-year-old, I let my mistakes kind of take over my life. I was 0.5 credits away from completing high school, and I didn't do it.
10 years later, at age 28, Jackie finished her high school diploma.
When I found out that I was pregnant, I know that I had to do something for myself if I wanted to make her a better person and provide a better life for her. My family never stopped pushing for me to be better because they knew what I could become and who I could become as a person. My support team is amazing. The educational director, my sister, and even my 7-year-old daughter has just been more than the support that I could ask for. I've been given an opportunity, and I'm just thankful for it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
I know that a lot of times, Mom, it might not seem like I'm listening to you, but I am. I hear you. And what you say really does matter to me.
I mean, let's be honest. No kid likes rules, but I get why we have them. I hear you, and I know it's because you care.
For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Sponsored by DHHS and aired in cooperation with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Early break with Sip and Jake.
So Matt Davis in the studio, president of the 1890 Initiative, Nebraska's NIL operation.
We have some big things that we're going to announce, I think, in the next, few weeks, few months for sure. So I think 1890 and the trajectory for our company is really good. I think we have the ability to have a top 5 collective in the country. I think we're trending that way.
Early break with Sip and Jake from 6 to 8 every weekday morning on 93.7 The Ticket.
I think it's just vapor. Vaping is safer than smoking, isn't it?
There's really not even that much nicotine in them, right?
One vape pod has as much nicotine as 1 pack of cigarettes.
My kid
knows it's dangerous. 5.4 million American kids vape, and most think it's harmless. Get your head out of the cloud. Talk to your kid about vaping. Visit talkaboutvaping.org. That's talkaboutvaping.org. Brought to you by the American Lung Association and the Ad Council.
Finally, a good reason to have a smart house. Just say, Alexa, play 93.7 The Ticket, and we'll magically start playing. How's it work? Nobody knows. Don't ask questions.
If you came across someone struggling with hunger, how would you recognize them? By their clothes, their age, the way they speak? Would you notice a 16-year-old boy who got his first job, not for extra spending money, but to help feed his little sisters? Or a mother who's in between jobs and sometimes goes to bed hungry so her kids can have dinner? Or a 14-year-old girl who signs up to every after-school activity, not to make friends, but just to get something to eat? Or a retiree who fell ill and had to choose
between getting medicine or groceries.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. People you pass by every day but never knew were hungry. I am hungered in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Banks Strong, and the Ad Council.
Back to Inside the Huddle, sponsored by Advanced Medical Imaging. Here is your host, Jay Foreman.
We are back after a quick break. Time goes by too quick, Harrison. We're already halfway through the hour, the power hour, early on a Sunday morning or Sunday mornings. But Harrison, after Big Ten Media Days, we got a pretty good long segment here, and I've been thinking about it. Number one, we'll get the bad news out of the way, right? You know how they say you want the good news or bad news?
Mm-hmm. You bad news first.
Bad news first, right? So you got there, and I obviously went last year, and I think the media darling team in the West is probably Illinois, right? I think Brett Bielema did a really good job of number one. I'll tell you this is, big shout out to DP and Ticket and Rebecca that Brett Bielema recognized us from last year, and I got to talk to him. I know the AD, me and him were teammates. So again, he got there early. He knows what the Big Ten landscape is. He knows how to work the media. He's a former offensive line coach, and he's a big dude.
Oh yeah.
I'd like to have him at the crib and see if I can feed him. But so I think they're the media darling of the team. I think that defense coming back is going to be tough for everybody, right? So everybody's kind of focused on them, right? Because they had a great year last year, kind of like out of nowhere. But they lost a lot, so it'll be interesting to see how they handle expectations. But also lost a ton of production. Chase Brown, to be frank, if he wasn't the best back in the Big Ten, he's one of them, and in the nation. He seemed like he'd been there forever. His brother Sidney, I think his name is Sidney, is gone. He was kind of like the eraser in the back end. Witherspoon, who was a top 10 or 15 pick, lockdown, legit number one corner, he's gone. A couple offensive linemen, so forth, and the quarterback DeVito's gone, even though they had some replacement. They were impressive, but I'm still waiting to see if they can do it 2 years in a row, because they lost the game at home against Michigan State that essentially they should have moonwalked into the Big Ten championship. So I don't think they've arrived, but they're being treated as such. Now you got some turnover. You got Ryan Walters, who I thought was extremely impressive. I knew about him before. He was Illinois defense coordinator last year. And he was up for a Colorado job, former Buff alum. Great hire. We'll figure out. He'll have some growing pains. He's a little experienced, but he was good. But with that being said, Robert De Niro's doppelganger, is that what it calls? Is it doppelganger when you got somebody doppelganger sat down with us? Okay. Kurt Ferentz looks like Robert De Niro. He does. And he's got that kind of smirk on his face,
Okay.
Yeah, he does. If you pull it up, two right here.
I saw him on the video. He just kind of got that vibe to him too.
But he does look like him though. He could be an extra if he wanted, or whatever. I would say he would be the older. He's the younger version, because I think Robert De Niro was like 84 and he just had a kid or something like that, right? Or was it Al Pacino, right? They're going back and forth, texting each other. Hey, I'm 84. I got a newborn. What about you? He's like, well, I'm 85. Well, anyways, I talked to him once, and a kid that I trained, Justice Sullivan, went to Iowa. And I know Justice's parents, and they love him. He sat down with us for 10 to 15 minutes, unsolicited. I think VJ went and recruited him or whatever, but he sat down with us. And I will say this, I know they've had some issues, and we didn't obviously get into that. Because that'd be totally unprofessional. But he was impressive. He was. And you could see why they've been consistent, and you can see why they've been so good. You can see why when he started out, I think 1-11, and I think his first year was when that crouch run up there. And the one thing that stood out to me, Harrison, is this. I asked him, because I always feel like there's this, when you have the ability to kind of get up to where Iowa was when they got to the Big Ten championship that year and lost to Michigan State, kind of go down and then come back and kind of exceed expectations, coach around some issues. You still got the gambling thing going on. You had the weight coach thing going on, or that was obviously a big deal because he had been there with Kurt Ferentz. But you just seem like you just kind of keep churning, right? Keep churning. I know Nebraska beat him last year. I didn't get into that because I probably would have got up. But the one thing about him, I asked him, what was the one moment or the one player that changed your program? I'm thinking, I always say Dallas Clark or somebody like that, or like some offensive player, Robert Gallery or some, a lineman. They've had a host of first round picks, Daniels, for the center guard. There are a ton of tight ends, whether it's George Kittle, Hawkinson, Noah Fant. You could have easily pointed to those. And he said Bob Sanders. He said Bob Sanders came in as an undersized recruit that they knew that he could play football, played 2.5 seasons on special teams, started to play better in progress and defense, never missed special teams, and kind of like got in towards the end of the season. But he said this: Bob Sanders set the tempo on how they practice and the physicality, how they play, and it hasn't changed from there forward. So he was the guy, right, that changed that program, because the way he operated for the next 2 years, and obviously he ended up being a great NFL player. Injuries got a hold of him. That the foundation and what they point to and what they show will never be changed. And so when you have Cooper DeJean talk to us about the way that they practice, they talk about Parker, the defensive coordinator, and what he expects for them, and they're willing to do it because it's going to pay off on Saturdays. It starts with Bob Sanders. He talked about how they had to slow him down because he was blitzing, blowing up the running backs. So they were literally kicking him out of practice. Okay, so what that means is and I'm always thinking of it bigger of it, that is like, instead of saying, "Hey, man, this isn't a guy this guy is too old school," he embraced it in a new school type of environment of college football, and he's still doing it right now. So, Nebraska fans, you can be physical and be a dominant team, and it has nothing to do with your star rankings. Because Bob Sanders was a 3-star at best. Listed at 5'9", my man is 5'7.5". Okay, but he's 205, and he is explosive. He's a playmaker, a great leader, and so that was impressive. And Kurt Ferentz did it was right, like it was no hesitation. And I think the way that Kurt Ferentz is, like the way that he talks, I can see why he does well recruiting and stuff like that, and the way that and he talked about another thing. You have to go back, but he has multiple former players involved in the football program, both coaching and administrative, recruiting roles, and like helping, with donations throughout the program. So when you're going to recruit a Harrison, right, it's something that you can see. It's just not come here, play football. Okay, go figure it out. Yeah, you can get a couple T-shirts. You come in. If you do things the right way and it's something that you want to do, this is an Iowa family. So with all the turmoil, now granted, they got some issues. Like just like Nebraska got some issues. Now, so we're going to get into that. You see why they stayed pat. And I hate to say it, but I'm going to give them a ton of respect. I'm not a fan. I'm not an Iowa, but I see why.
Yeah, I mean, it's only fun. It's fun beating the Hawkeyes because it's not easy. I mean, that's part of it, right? Like if it was a team that would just beat up easy every year, it's not a fun.
Well, it's fun. They beat us 7 times. They act like they won a national. They act like they beat the '90s Huskers.
Yeah.
Now, we found ways to lose games. They've outcoached us. They've physicaled us a lot of times. But
we've handed it over.
We've given it teed up. Just like we are just incapable of playing. But I see why their program is sustainable. I do. And you have to respect that.
Well, like he says, that bounce back year, that showed a lot.
Right.
Low expectations too.
Right. But the thing is, he does it the way he needs to do it. He does it, according to him, the right way. And he's found a way to sell Iowa to anybody across the nation. And when he says it's family, there's guys that have played in that. LeVar Woods is one of the best recruiters in the nation. He came out either a little bit after me. I remember him. He's on their coaching staff. He's groomed him up through the Iowa coaching ranks. They have guys that are in their pro. Tim Dwight, as crazy as he is still in their like involved in their program. Tavian Banks, who was my host, is involved in their program. Tim Dwight was on my recruiting trip when I went to Iowa, is involved in their program. Eric Thigpen, who kind of was me and him were supposed to be the safeties, played for a little bit. I don't think he ever was all Big Ten, is involved in their program and helps them recruit the Chicago area. So they found a way to do Iowa things in this kind of ever-changing environment of college football. So Reluctantly, I'm gonna not reluctantly. I'm gonna give them respect, and I was impressed by them. The other team I was impressed by, which I'm not very surprised, was Wisconsin. They are going to be tougher than I originally thought they were. So they changed my opinion on the outlook of their team. I thought by bringing in the air raid that, it would be a total identity change, talking to every single player, including Braylon Allen. He came over, Amon Green was with us, so he knew Amon, was, obviously a big fan of Amon's. He came when we were at dinner, talked to us for 20 minutes, talked to us on air, and then I got to talk to him afterwards. He was a little lukewarm to adjust to the offense, but he looks at it as there's going to be more opportunity. So what it tells me now is they're going to do things. They're going to be even more dangerous on offense just by the ability to put 4 legitimate passing options out there. They brought in, it seems like, every transfer portal quarterback and let them figure it out. That'll take care of itself. They, I think, recruited a 3 or 4 star quarterback that's going to be coming in 2024, along with Luke Fickell's defensive background, along with the excellent linebacker group, along with the standard that Jim Leonard left there, right? So the defense, those guys in that program, doesn't matter if you run a defense that's, 3-3-5 like Nebraska, 4-3, still 3-4, or whatever scheme that Fickell and those guys are going to implement. It'll work because of the foundation that Jim Leonard has set forth from the years past. Those guys know how to work. Those guys know how to play together. They know how to be physical.
Mm-hmm. I feel like defense always comes around faster than
right, because a lot of it is effort and communication.
Yeah.
Well, now you're adding a little bit different when Luke Fickell is a well-respected and a very successful defensive-minded coach, right? Along with the offensive coach, along with the best running back in the Big Ten, him and Blake Corum, and the 2 best running backs, arguably in the nation. And let me tell you something, man. Braylon Allen is a big man. He ain't I always say big boy. That's a man right there. I didn't realize how big he was. I'm 6'3". He's at least 6'2". He's every bit of 240, and there's not an ounce of fat on him. And he was very interesting to talk to. I was delighted how humble he was or is, motivated he is, thoughtful he is, constantly asking Amon what he needs to do to be better. What is he? He asked Amon what he thought his holes in his games were, what he can improve, asking him about different types of workouts. Then asked me from a defensive perspective what he could get better at. The guy was there. He was, as much as we were trying to get information out of him, he was trying to get information out of a bunch of old dudes. So I think those 2 teams are reluctantly, I think, are going to be tough. But you know what? The good thing about it, they're going to beat each other up before Nebraska plays them. And now quickly, Nebraska. I was confident, or not confident. I felt like, I did it with DP. We did our, season predictions.
Mm-hmm.
I said 7-5. I think I stayed pat right there.
7-5.
Yeah, 7-5. Now, granted, you guys, health wise, I feel better about one particular group, which is the offensive line. Ethan Piper was there.
Yeah, I was curious about him.
Yeah.
He actually, he was the most, I think, intriguing out of all the guys.
I was just about to say that.
Just because you, first of all, probably didn't expect it to be him,
right,
out of all the linemen. But no, he talked quite a bit. And one thing I liked about him, and I wonder if that's why Matt Rule brought him, is he's really big on just the whole Nebraska culture. Yeah. Obviously, he's from here.
Yeah.
He sold that really well. But I'm curious what you thought.
Same thing, but I think that Ethan, you always, being a former player, you kind of go off body language, but then also you hear him talking, you hear some things, and everybody's been through up and downs in their career, right? Mm-hmm. And there's times that, reluctantly, you have to come to terms that I didn't perform as well as I possibly could, right? And that's a hard pill to swallow. Ethan Piper did that. Now, does it mean is he the next coming of Brendan Steyer or something like? No, but what it let me know is the light finally came on for him in whatever form or fashion. He's bought into what Matt Rule is implemented in the coaching staff. He is fully in on Coach Raiola, but then also he's an embodiment of the team, or of the guys, of majority of guys, because he's a holdover, right? So you evaluate the new coach in their culture that they're trying to implement on the guys that are still here, and the guys that maybe haven't either reached their expectations or played up to expectations, or haven't played as much as they thought they should or could have. That's Ethan Piper, right? So for him to come, and then you got to think, you wouldn't bat an eye at Jeff Sims goes, right? He's a starting quarterback. Luke Reimer, been a 2 or 3 year starter and very productive last year. You know that you'd be surprised if they didn't go, right? Ethan Piper's name is like, okay, well, what's going on? Now you see. That gives me a little bit more confidence that they will be able to kind of, I would say, they have the figure it out percentage in their favor if something goes wrong. So I'm gonna stay pat at 7-4. At the worst case scenario, 6-6. It won't be easy, right? Because the schedule is technically easy, but they still have a lot to get better at.
Well, you never know. People say that a lot. Wait till the season starts.
Right. Well,
a lot of that's going to change on what's considered an easy game or not.
Well, sure, but the reason why I think the schedule is easy. One, the turnover in the Big Ten West, coaching, philosophy wise, right? The loss of dominant and players in the Big Ten West by every team. Now, Iowa was able to actually finally get a quarterback and an NFL tight end. They did free agency better than anybody, right? Or the transfer portal. But I think that's the circumstances work in Nebraska's favor. You're playing Minnesota first, but you get to play Colorado in Deion's first year. Even though they might have a whole bunch of new roster guys, they don't have any continuity. So you're not – and they were 1-11 last year. There's still that 1-11 in their program. And when you play teams, Northwestern, who's always kind of been the thorn, kind of like a hemorrhoid or something, right? They are just they shouldn't win a game this year, right? And definitely shouldn't beat Nebraska. Purdue, a whole new deal. Braum is gone, and they don't have that. So that's why I say it. So I feel confident coming out of Big Ten that should be my prediction. But it's week by week, day by day, and realistically, I haven't been around the team in the off season, so I'm assuming that they've had a really good summer. Fall camp is just going to be kind of just I always say it's a spillover, and they got less than a month before we tee it up. So we're going to go to break. We're going to come back and address the elephant in the room, and then send it off to Pete Ferguson. But this is Jay Foreman inside the huddle, brought to you by Advanced Medical Imaging. We'll be right back. This is former Husker and NFL linebacker Jay Foreman. For years, I've suffered from degenerative problems in both of my ankles, but thanks to a thorough and thought-out plan provided by Advanced Medical Imaging, I was able to get my life back with the least amount of pain as possible. While working through multiple options, the team of physicians at Advanced Medical Imaging were there to answer any questions I had. If you're experiencing any pain at all and want to get your life back, go to amimaging.com or give them a call at 402-484-6677. Advanced Medical Imaging, located at 7601 Pioneers Boulevard.
This is Bud Steinhorst, President and CEO of LIBA, the Lincoln Independent Business Association. Join us every Saturday from 9 to 10 a.m. on 93.7 The Ticket for the LIBA Business Hour, as we discuss local business and highlight those who are thriving in the Lincoln area. It's the LIBA Business Hour, Saturdays from 9 to 10 a.m. on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Old School with VP and J.
As long as it's taken for him to build up that program to be pretty successful by their standards, and look, pretty successful by Big Ten West standards, you have to take that into accountability. You can't be an impulsive, in the moment type of decision maker, because how you handle Pat Fitzgerald could stymie you from hiring, because those coaches talk.
93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
My early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take, but it gave my mom and me more time to plan together.
Talk to your family about seeing a doctor. Go to alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
If you or someone you know is having thoughts of suicide or experiencing a mental health or substance use crisis, call 988 for free, confidential, and compassionate support. On July 16th, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is transitioning to 988. There is hope For 24/7 support, call, text, or chat 988.
Sponsored by Nebraska DHHS, aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
I wanted to quit for so long, but I didn't know where to start.
I was afraid of what people would think, but then I found the right support to start my recovery journey. 1 in 14 Americans reports experiencing a substance use disorder, a treatable medical condition. Treatment can take many forms, so there are a variety of options to explore and find the one that works best for you. Recovery from drug addiction is possible.
Paid for by the CDC. Sponsored by Nebraska DHHS. Aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Mario fue pintor más de 30 años. Cuando me dijo que se le estaban olvidando las cosas, fue difícil. Un día me dijeron que pintara el marco del lado por dentro y pinté el lado de afuera.
Yo le diría a la gente que le diga a su familia lo que está pasando con él.
Si algo se nota diferente, podría ser Alzheimer. Es momento de hablarlo. Visita alz.org/nuestras historias para saber más. Un mensaje de the Alzheimer's Association y the Ad Council.
Nebraska State Veterans Homes are here to serve veterans, their spouses, surviving spouses, and Gold Star parents. Join your fellow veterans and their families at one of our homes in Bellevue, Kearney, Norfolk, or Scotts Bluff. With a sliding scale to determine your financial contribution, an excellent clinical team, and plenty of fun activities, our homes are the perfect retirement choice. Learn more at veterans.nebraska.gov/homes. Sponsored by the Nebraska Department of Veterans Affairs, aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
You're listening to Inside the Huddle with Jay Foreman, sponsored by Advanced Medical Imaging.
We are back inside the Huddle. Jay Foreman, brought to you by Advanced Medical Imaging. Appreciate their support. The fastest hour in show business on a Sunday, man. When you wake up at 6:30, and then next thing you know, you're done by 8. We got to extend these hours. We got to figure out something. But anyways, the elephant in the room, obviously on Fan Day, Nebraska unfortunately had a tight end coach that had to resign. Bob, was it Wagger?
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate in the sense of, look, that's a personal problem, and I don't ever try to get into those details, but obviously you could read between the lines of what happened. Everybody makes mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's perfect. And if anybody wants to put the judge hat on, go right ahead. It never really works out for you when you do that, because everybody makes mistakes, mistakes, right? Young, old, new to the game. I'm sure he feels worse than anybody. But hey, look, you have to make decisions, and he made a decision that he wasn't upholding what he wanted his players to do and decided to step away and so forth and so on. It's unfortunate timing in the sense of it's right before Matt Rule's first year as a Nebraska head coach. He obviously has a very close relationship with Matt Rule. I'm just assuming, because it's not normal to hire a high school coach to a full-time position coach. Probably had to do that in order, because he's a really successful high school coach from Texas. He was he was a big part in Nebraska and Matt Rule and the whole thing of having inroads into Texas players earlier than other teams. We've seen that in this 2024 class. We've seen it in some of the 23 and potentially transfer portal guys that are here now, and 25 class as well. They're, and so Matt Rule obviously had a relationship with him maybe from when Baylor. I think they are still in good shape based on some other people on the staff to continue along of it. But it's just something that you don't want heading into your first camp, because it could be a distraction. But I think Nebraska did a good job of dealing with it. It's dealt with. I'm sure Matt Rule hasn't been able to get that complimentary last day off to kind of chill. Probably had to have a emergency staff meeting or meetings to figure out who's going to pull more weight. And look, I could tell you this about Matt Rule. If nothing else, when this happened, this whole staff, since they've been here, is they know that if they have any downtime, what else can they do? So it's going to be all hands on deck. Right now, he insulated himself, and this wasn't. I don't think he didn't hire Bob Wager to know that he wasn't going to even make it 3 or 4 months and not get to the first year. But his analysts is coached at the FBS level, tight ends in particularly, for 7 years. So he moves right in, I assume, to the tight end coach. Then you got to find an analyst, which you can probably pull from, another offensive analyst, or maybe, I don't know what they have, or, as far as they have a huge staff, support staff. So I feel like they're in a good situation, but it's not ideal, not only for the players, because you got to think of it like this, right? Nelson, that we just recruited, the multiple tight ends that we got to move to his room, Bonner, Applegate, right? You moved from the defensive side to the tight end position. You moved Rollins to defensive side, but it was all based on Bob being there, and probably the new tight end coach as well. So don't let me shortchange him. But then also the recruiting aspect as well, right? 24 class, the relationships, which will still be there, but probably, obviously it's a little bit different now, right? He's not calling up Coach Harrison as the tight end coach. He's calling up as, hey, I'm Bob. I'm trying to get back, into the coaching game, maybe at the high school level. Unfortunate. Nothing that's going to be, a destined for Nebraska. But, I think, Rule is going to be able to handle it, and the team's going to be able to handle it. And plus, you know what? I always say this, Nebraska can't have nice things without going through some adversity. So I think it'll work out well. It's not ideal going into fan day, but I'm going to try to get some of these texts from YouTube. We got about 2 minutes, so we're up against the clock. My man Rick says that this Husker team will be more organized and disciplined. He thinks Teddy Prohaska will have a good year. Teddy Prohaska will have a good year if he can play all 12 games.
Yeah.
Right? That's it. Right? And he says we have to win our first game. Ideally, yeah, we don't. Yes, I don't even want to say we don't have to, but if we don't win the first game, it doesn't mean like, oh, there we go, the season's over. Right? This is a long process right here. Coach doesn't get an 8-year contract thinking that year one is going to be turned around. Realistic expectations are there. I don't think Matt Rule's coming in like the first year of Baylor to go 1-11. He can't do that and won't do that. And then Jeremiah Jensen says, starting off well the first 2 games and staying healthy at key positions, QB, O-line will dictate how the season goes. I agree, especially at the QB position, right? It'll be interesting. I want to hear the news constantly about the backup quarterback position and hear coming out of scrimmages that they actually have played well. And there is a clear-cut number 2. Yes, Rick, I agree with the whole we're 4-0 when we play Michigan. Okay, and then he says Coach Rule said they didn't show anything they're going to do in the spring game. That's great. Look, eventually, you got to line up and play football. Offensive line and QB is going to dictate a lot. But again, quickest hour on a Sunday morning. Appreciate you guys listening. Our views are way up. Keep them going. We're going to start to pump it out there more, and we're getting closer and closer to football season. Jay Foreman, Inside the Huddle, Advanced Medical Imaging, 7601 Pioneers Boulevard. Thank you, and we will see you next week.